Questions we ask is the most important part of our sales process. And what I like to do is I use this analogy of if you've ever gone to like therapy, if you've ever gone to like a counselor, right? You sit on a couch, you know nothing about this person, but they ask you such insightful questions about yourself over and over again, and you just somehow trust them, but you know nothing about them, right? That is the energy that we kind of want to bring on these sales calls, is by asking questions that make our prospects really think about, wow, this person really understands my business without us having to say anything or pitch anything, right? And so that's the goal of our discovery. But on top of that, we need to get really clear truth of what our prospects are going through. And I like to frame it that way, of like, we're trying to get to our prospects' truth of what is actually happening behind the scenes. So when I'm asking questions, this is what I'm looking for. One, I want to go as deep as possible, which I'll give you an example of in a second. And then two, I want to ask questions that nobody else is asking. One of the biggest pieces of feedback that a lot of our members get, and then at Bad Marketing we get, is people, before I even pitch anything, go, this was the best call I've ever had. You've asked me questions that no other agency has asked before. And so a lot of it's really simple, but people are too nervous to get into that much detail. So for example, I try to know so much about a person's business that I understand their business better than they do. And so that's through a lot of questions. I ask hundreds of questions on sales calls. It's very fast paced. It's a lot we dig into. So for example, I'll go through all of your metrics, like what's your average, say I'm talking to like a painting company. And we're trying to get to the bottom of how much money they're making, right? I'm very blunt, and I'll be like, cool. So I start with small questions like, what's your average quote price that you give, right? How many are you getting? How many of those are you getting per month? How many do you want to be getting, right? If I give you 10 leads, how many of those are closing? And I'm asking all these questions, and those little questions lead to the big questions. Like, cool. How many jobs did you do last month? Right? Now I know how much revenue they're making because I know their average deal price. Then I'll ask them, how much money did you make last month? What was your revenue? What about the month before that and the month before that? And so a lot of people don't like going this deep because they're uncomfortable. But a lot of people will come in and say, like a prospect will say, oh, we did 500K last year. But the reality is maybe they did 200K in a single month, and then they had months without any sales. That's a very different business. And so by asking these questions and going that much detail of like, how much revenue did you make this month? What about last month and the month before that? We get really clear pictures. Then I'll go into profit margins. And with contracting companies specifically, I'll give you an example where I'll be like, cool, what's your monthly profit? And they'll always say like, oh, I'm getting 40% profit. I'm making, say, whatever, 10K a month in net profit. And a lot of people will just take that at face value. But if you really understand the industry, I grew up in a family that was contractors. Their profit was what they kept to pay their bills. And so what are my questions? So, hey, based on my experience, a lot of contractors will take the profit and that's what they live off of. So is the profit before or after you pay yourself? Oh, it's actually after, it's before I pay myself. So I use that 10K to live. Okay, so your business is not profitable. Like, that is a very different conversation to have. And so people are like, go to the end of the call and they ask for the close and they get a price objection. They're like, I don't understand. This guy had 10K in profit. When in reality, he didn't, because that's what he's living on, is the 10K. And so for me, with my questions is I want to get that deep. I want to really understand a person's business. If it's an info product, I want to understand their entire funnel. Where are leads coming from? What is the page they go through? Why is it set up this way? Why is the copy said this way? Who's coaching? How many coaches do you have? How do you pay your coaches? And this is the type of detail people don't get into. And so if you have an agency salesperson asking you how you pay your coaches, they're going to be like, damn, this person knows so much about this space. It's crazy. I can imagine that their team is really good at what they do. And so that's kind of my main focus when it comes to asking questions. Get really deep and ask really expert focused questions.